Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, wherever you are in the world. Welcome to the opening ceremony of the online International Conference on Women in STEM in the Time of Pandemic, hosted by UNITAR, IFES, and GDC. I'm Soma Chakrabarti, the first Vice President of IFES, and I work for ANSYS. I will be your moderator for all the sessions today. We'll start the conference now. Before we have our panelists speaking, here are a few housekeeping items. First, you may have some questions, so please submit your comments and questions in the question and answer function on this GoToWebinar. You may already know there will be 4 regional sessions and a closing ceremony besides this opening ceremony. And the timings are this session, the opening ceremony has started. It will be around until 11:50 GMT. Then the Asia and Pacific session will be from 12 to 13:30 GMT. The Europe and Americas will be from 14 to 15:30. Middle East and North Africa from 16 to 17:30. And the session 5, which is on Africa, it's 18 to 19:30. Finally, we'll have a closing ceremony, and which is from 19:30 to 20. That is from 7:30 p.m. to 8 p.m. GMT. Now, between every session, we are going to break. So please make sure that you come back, and you don't have to get another link or so. The same link that you had used to connect with this session will be working for all the sessions. To start with, we have Mihoko Kumamoto, the Director of Division for Prosperity of United Nations Institute of Teaching and Research, Training and Research. She's passionate about creating an inclusive, sustainable future. She's a visiting lecturer at Hiroshima University. She has over 18 years of professional experience in the development cooperation field and has been with the United Nations for more than 12 years. Mihoko, the floor is yours for your opening comments.
Thank you so much, Soma. Good evening from Japan to everyone around the world. Thank you so much for the kind introduction. I would like to welcome everyone to our online international conference on women in STEM in the time of the pandemic, hosted by UNITA, the International Federation of Engineering Education Studies, and the Global Engineering Deans Council. Today is International Women's Day, and we wanted to celebrate this by putting focus on women working in the various STEM fields. Women play a significant role of the STEM workforce, taking leadership roles in the fields of medicine, engineering, research, and others. Despite this, UN Women estimates that globally only 30% of the STEM workforce is women, highlighting the need for gender parity in these fields. The ongoing COVID-19 pandemic is also affecting women worldwide, offering a new set of challenges to an already heavily burdened segment of the STEM population. Our commitment at UNITA to gender parity has led us to partner with IFES and GEDS to organize today's conference. So thank you so much for this collaboration. Our aim is to explore the pandemic's impact on women working in the various STEM fields. We want to provide a space where both men and women can talk about their experiences and share perspectives and strategies for coping and thriving despite the challenges brought about by these challenges. I hope that today's discussions will be fruitful and productive for everyone. Thank you so much and welcome once again. Thank you, Soma. Over to you.
Thank you, Mihoko. Well, we now have a great panel in STEM during the pandemic. What happened? Let me first introduce our panelists, and I'll then request them to speak for a few minutes. The first panelist will be Mr. Nikhil Seth. He's the Executive Director. Before assuming the post of the UNITAR Executive Director, Nikhil Seth was the Director of the Division of Sustainable Development, Department of Economic Social Affairs, which is called DESA, at the United Nations Secretariat in New York. We have His Excellency Mr. Ken Okaniwa, the Japanese Ambassador to the United Nations Deputy Permanent Representative, as the Deputy Permanent Representative. We also have Mr. Alaa Ashmawy. He's the president of the International Federation of Engineering Education Societies and a special advisor with ABET. We all know ABET is for Engineering Education Accreditation, global accreditor of academic programs in engineering, computing, engineering technology, and applied and natural sciences. We also have Şirin Tekinay, who is the chair of the Global Engineering Deans Council. She is most recently served as the American University of Sharjah as Dean of College of Engineering starting February 1st, 2020 for a year. Her areas of interest include network science, mobile networks, sensor networks, and applications. With that, I will be reading His Excellency Mr. Sidi Ould Tah's bio shortly. In the meantime, may I request Mr. Seth to speak a few words about your thoughts on this auspicious occasions of Women, International Women's Day, and especially regard to women in STEM at the time of the pandemic.
Thank you, Soma, and thank you, Mihoko, and our partners in organizing this special day. And greetings to all of you on International Women's Day. I especially want to thank our partners, IFES and GEDC. And of course, we are all committed and will reinforce our commitment to the question of women in STEM. And that's what our topic of discussion today is. I wanted to thank all the distinguished panelists and speakers. I know most of them, and I warmly greet you also from Geneva. Of course, we are anchoring, I would like to anchor some of this in Agenda 2030, which was adopted over 5 years ago. And its implementation has caught the imagination of millions of people all around the world. And of course, if you look at all the goals and targets, the power of science is everywhere, as is also women's empowerment and gender equality. Women's equality and empowerment is not enshrined in only one goal, but it is there throughout the text and all the goals and targets of Agenda 2030. Crucial for women and girls and their higher participation in science will be absolutely vital for achieving the 2030 agenda. Then first we need to ensure that all hands are on deck. The human capacity gap in implementing Agenda 2030 has to be addressed. And this gap will not go away unless we have a more robust engagement of women in science and STEM. And this is especially so in recovering from a post-COVID world. Sustaining economic growth and achieving higher productivity through tech upgrading and innovation implies that we need more women in STEM. The figures are clear. There's a report I was reading from the McKinsey Global Institute, which says that if women were to participate fully, there would be an additional 28 trillion to the annual GDP by 2025. Unfortunately, we are facing a backward slide in the number of women filling science-based roles, and girls are less likely to consider a career in computer science, physics, or engineering now than 100 years ago. And in OECD countries, only 14% of young women enter higher education recently chose science compared to 39% of men. While getting women into STEM fields is important, equally important is getting them to retain their jobs in these fields. Many women drop out of these careers, and the research finds that if you could cut female attrition or dropping out of these fields by 25%, we would add almost 250,000 women just in one country, the United States alone. Of course, the reasons for this are multiple and complex. The masculine work culture or rhythms, the lack of gender sensitivity in the workplace, issues relating to parental leave or work-life balance policies, gender bias in promotion, in salaries, or simply gendered stereotypical attitudes. These are major barriers to entry and major barriers in retention. Well, combating gender stereotypes is essential to overcoming gender inequalities in science and STEM fields. This includes the way our children are educated and gender bias in the classroom, starting from early learning. It's not something which is there only in the secondary and tertiary levels, but right from early learning, these biases get imprinted in the mind. For example, assuming that boys are better at math and physics while girls are more suited to social sciences. These are stereotypes which we've lived for forever. I can, I can look at my own life and education and see how these stereotypes have not gone away in all the years that we have seen education and the progress that has been made in education. Gender equality is very close to UNITAR and to my heart. I have participated as a gender champion, a network, and to serve and strive towards gender parity and dissolution of the barriers in gender. We have a women's leadership program in UNITAR, which is working across the UN system to promote the participation of women, including Security Council, delegations in science-based meetings also, and getting more women to participate in leadership roles in many of these meetings. If we need to act together on multiple fronts, through multiple channels, using multiple tools and with multiple means, there's no one single solution to the problems that we face. And but awareness is the starting point of fighting this plague which has beset us for centuries. And UNITAR is committed to working with member countries in attaining the SDGs, including, of course, SDG 5, which is specific to the issue of women and girls empowerment. And STEM fields are those where we need to focus better on the inclusion and participation of women. I just wanted to give you a brief snapshot of the types of things UNITAR is doing. Our most techie area is the UN UNOSAT, and in which we use satellite imagery analysis in helping countries over a host of areas, including better land utilization, environmental mapping, flood warning, coastal zone erosion. There's so many applications, including in the human rights and humanitarian areas. But here, I'm proud to say that our UNOSAT division has more than 50% women working there, many of them PhDs who work on satellite imagery analysis. The COVID-19 pandemic has impacted everyone, as you were saying, Mihoko and Soma, and it has exposed that how little progress is being made to, that we have made over the years to include women in STEM, and how it has been rolled back by decades of the pandemic. We have the pandemic has disproportionately impacted on women, the human rights of women and children, violence at the workplace, reinforcing the stereotype that a woman's place is in the home, that they are the caregivers, and all these views that we had struggled against for so many years have all been pushed back in a sense by the pandemic. We are refusing to recognize the leading role of women in the pandemic response. If you look at all the images you see on healthcare workers, frontline workers, the majority of people we see on screen are women. And yet we are not being able to reinforce this vision of the role of women in STEM, which is unfortunate. Women researchers are at the forefront of the vaccine development, the therapeutics, and even the technology that helps governments and institutions keep track of how the virus is spreading. So today's conference is all about women in STEM and how can we as individuals and change leaders, how can we enthuse the world, the media, the kind of perception formers in seeing and recognizing and honoring the role of women and encourage women to be in STEM, to stay in STEM, and to contribute to the gaps that exist in this field. So I thank you, everyone. And I look forward to a robust question and answer session after hearing the panelists, where we can talk a little more about what we need to do to make sure that more women are respected and honored in STEM and are kept back in STEM, regardless of the number of years they've been working. So thank you very much.
Thank you so very much, Nikhil. You really harped on the important points, especially a woman being in the STEM. I know all through my life how much of the problems you talked about I have gone through, and we'll be having some questions for you. At this time, it is my honor to introduce Mr. Ken Okinawa, His Excellency Ken Okinawa. He's the Japanese ambassador to the United Nations and the Deputy Permanent Representative, Mr. Okinawa.
Thank you, Soma. I would like to thank Mr. Seth and UNITA for inviting me to speak at this important event on a very special day. And I'm afraid looking at the screen, I'm not contributing to the gender balance of the panelists or the speakers today. But nevertheless, it's my great pleasure to speak on behalf of the Japanese mission. Japan has been promoting STEM for women and girls both at home and abroad. In Japan, STEM education for women and girls is being vigorously promoted, so much so that there is a word to describe women pursuing studies or careers in STEM. The word is rikejo. Rikejo. Turning to the international arena, at the G20 Osaka Summit in 2019, chaired by Japan, the G20 leaders committed to improving access to STEM education for women and girls. In the same year, at the TICAD 7 conference, also hosted by Japan, the African leaders, Japan and the development partners committed to supporting women and entrepreneurs in the continent by promoting STEM education and training. In our efforts to achieve gender equality, women empowerment is crucial. In today's world, the ability to harness digital technology and other technology will go a long way in promoting empowerment of women. Unfortunately, in reality, women and girls lag behind in access to education and training in STEM. Unless we double our efforts to promote STEM education for women and girls, there is a risk of further aggravating the existing gender gap. Japan very much appreciates the training programs implemented by UNITA Division of Prosperity in Hiroshima for capacity development of women in STEM. Currently, with contributions from Japan, UNITA is providing online training to 80 women from government, civil society, and academia in Sudan, Somalia, Ethiopia, and Kenya. We are also supporting another program that will develop digital literacy of participants, both women and men, from the Sahel region. Once the participants complete these programs, we hope they make use of their acquired skills to achieve success in their respective activities. While the current pandemic has severely affected all of us, the measures to control the spread of the virus has accelerated the existing trend of digital transformation. While conventional activities had to be restrained, online activities such as e-commerce and e-government have expanded significantly. This is why promoting women in STEM is all the more important at this time. I commend UNITA for focusing on this issue on the occasion of the International Women's Day. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much. We will continue with the discussions, but what really struck me, Your Excellency, is that when you talked about the digital literacy of women and how Japan is helping many other countries, especially in Africa, Sub-Saharan Africa, and many other places. We'll come back to you again with some questions, but at this time, let me introduce His Excellency, Sidi Ould Tah from Arab Bank, and may I have your thoughts, please?
Thank you very much. First of all, I would like to thank Seth for giving me this opportunity to participate in this webinar, and I would like to take this opportunity to wish a happy Women's Day for all women, and particularly for the two ladies who are participating to this webinar. So the Arab Bank for Economic Development in Africa has always been very much engaged and committed to support STEM, and particularly to support women in STEM. And by the way, the Arab Bank new strategy, Badea 2030, which is very much aligned with the SDGs and aligned with the Agenda 2063 of the African Union. This new strategy, one of the 4 pillars is just about women and youth. And we are very proud of the various projects supported by our institution throughout Sub-Saharan Africa to support women in many areas of activities, particularly microfinance, but also more recently in STEM. And one of the projects we are really very proud of is the project we have recently launched with Afro Champions, which is a STEM-oriented project, and 64% of the beneficiaries are women. So we went beyond the parity, and we are very proud of that. And that project is targeting supporting entrepreneurs and micro-entrepreneurs to provide them with resources and knowledge to help them to innovate in math and science-based activities, and to develop small enterprises and small micro enterprises to develop value chain, to use science and technology to develop value chain in Africa. And some of the micro projects developed by young ladies was in the value chain of palm and coconut and essential oils, and also in environmental engineering. So we are very proud of this project, which was implemented in 2 countries, in Ghana and Mauritius. We are going to scale up this type of project, and we are now, unfortunately with COVID, our STEM project and programs were a little bit delayed, but now we are trying to re-engage with our partners to do more projects in the area of STEM, and particularly to empower women, since that's one of our 4 main pillars of our new strategy. And by the way, within Badea also we are promoting women, and particularly in our IT department, we have more women than men, and we are very proud of that. So although we are a financial institution, but we also try to attract the best talent in STEM from universities, and particularly with we give a priority for women. So we expect to continue to work with UNITAR and also all our other partners also to develop STEM and particularly to empower women in STEM. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Your Excellency. Your background has been in economics, and what I find from the web, I must say, I did a little search, and I think that that's one of the, we don't say it in STEM explicitly, but that's what a part of the entire STEM applications that we want to bring economic development and economic, I would say that goodness to the society. So when we come back for question answers, I personally have some questions for you. Thank you so much for being here. You have been the Director General of the Arab Bank of Economic Development in Africa and have held many good positions. So we will come back to you. But now I'm going to none other than my dear friend and colleague, Dr. Alaa Ashmawy, and I have known him for quite a long time, but I sometimes don't pronounce his last name very well, so I apologize for that. He's the president of the International Federation of Engineering Education Societies, and really my boss because I'm the first vice president, one of the vice presidents, and he's the special advisor again with ABIT. So I would like to know, Alaa, what are your thoughts on what do you see the women in STEM especially affected during the pandemic? Could you please tell us your thoughts on that?
Sure. Thank you, Soma. And I prefer to think of us as colleagues, not
okay.
A boss, and probably next year you might be my boss in
okay.
in IP. So it's a pleasure to work with you, and to all our distinguished panelists and participants, you do offer a very warm welcome from the International Federation of Engineering Education Societies. And as Soma said, today we celebrate the critical role women have played and continue to play in the STEM discipline. But today is also a reflection of the deep challenges faced by women, and in particular women in STEM, in the time of the COVID-19 pandemic. So despite the fact that women make up more than 70% of the healthcare and social care workforce, as an example, their sacrifices in confronting the pandemic are rarely highlighted in the media and so on. And in addition to the physical time and space barriers that limit women's access to career resources during the pandemic, the rising risk of stress-related mental health issues is also real, and we have to think about that. Another point I wanted to add is what Dr. Nikhil Seth mentioned regarding the dropout and retention issues in STEM, which have been really exacerbated by the pandemic. So a few months ago, I read an article in Scientific American which highlighted the possible lasting career damage that women in science and technology might suffer as a result of the pandemic. It is a reality in many parts of the world that women carry a higher burden when it comes to childcare and household responsibilities. And during extended lockdowns, these stereotypes are reinforced regarding how only women are expected to devote time and effort for their family responsibilities, including children's education, while at the same time maintaining their career progress. This becomes particularly burdensome for women in STEM. And in the absence of easy access to labs, for example, and competing facilities, the risk of career setback is real. And the lack of mechanisms to remedy the situation is a serious threat. One colleague of mine told me that she once was teaching, she teaches computer programming at the university, and one day she had to deliver 2 lectures online, supervise her 5-year-old child who can't go to the kindergarten during the lockdown, and drive her 8 and 10-year-olds to school and back. Another colleague of mine had to reschedule her morning lectures so that her husband can babysit their toddler during the evening while she delivers her lectures online in the evening. So these challenges are real. And in our society, the International Federation of Engineering Education Societies, we're committed to fighting inequality and gender bias. We are proud to have an elected executive committee that is gender balanced, 50-50, despite the fact that we don't have quotas or mandates for such a balance. Our dear Vice President, Soma Chakrabarti, who is introduced me and who's moderating today's virtual conference, is a key leader in our ranks. And we're embarking upon a 5-year strategic plan that focuses on what's called peace engineering in collaboration with social sciences, health sciences, and basic sciences partners. And in addition to our focus on utilizing engineering resources as part of peace engineering to fight poverty, food and water scarcity, and fossil fuel dependency, one of the main thrusts of our initiatives is gender equality. In the end, I would like to thank our partners in UNITAR for making this event possible and all the speakers and panelists for their time and efforts. We will hear in the conference today from real people from around all corners of the globe who will discuss and identify solutions to the challenges faced by women in STEM during the pandemic. I hear that you will all enjoy the perspectives of the participants as well as the diversity of the presenters and panelists. Thank you, and Soma, over to you.
Thank you so much, Alaa. We don't see Shireen here. We have been trying to contact contact Shireen and others to get hold of her, but we will continue with the questions right now because questions have started coming. There is a question from Kavita Krishnamurthy, and the question is, it's so dear to heart. Many women drop out because of their marriage, and I have seen it in India when I'm originally from India. So what are your suggestions to make women who get married but are they're well educated? You know, I mean, they're educated, but after getting married, they had to leave the workforce or leave the STEM workforce. How can we help them? May I ask Nikhil about the question?
Thank you. I'm happy to have a shot at that because I have a daughter too who is in that crucial 30 to 40 age group where I think the attrition rate for women is probably highest. Of course, Kavita's question is not particular to STEM, but the entire question of working women in this age group where they feel these compulsions and the sense of guilt. They are always torn between their careers and the fact that they may not be doing justice to their jobs and the fact that they feel also that they may not be doing justice to their kids. And this is a common predicament. I see a lot of women who have young children and who are enthusiastic and want a career, and they go through that predicament. I think there are several ways in which this has to be addressed. Of course, the starting point is at home where you have a supportive family which looks at the various dimensions of this predicament of the woman at home and what is it that will give her more assurance of care at home, of sharing the burden of care at home, of a more balanced relationship with the men at home who take over some of these responsibilities, and that caregiving and sharing has to start at home. So that is a starting place where women in this particular age group, I think, will feel much more secure. But there's also the workplace where there's several things which have been experimented in, particularly in the corporate world, I'm more familiar with corporate America, and I know the number of supportive measures that have been taken in the context of my daughter, for example, who's working there, and the support systems there, the mentoring programs for women. And I think mentoring programs for women are particularly important because of all the things that people in the corporate world cherish the most. I think it's that mentoring and the support they get from other women who've been through this predicament earlier on in their lives, but have stuck on to their careers and how they've managed to do that. So, as I said, multiple ways, multiple means, and multiple things have to be done to remove these prejudices, to provide a more supportive environment to the working mothers, both at home and in the workplace. So let me stop there, Soma.
Thank you so much. I have a question for, I think I mean, I would say anyone can answer, but it's probably for Alaa because it has university industry, academia industry engagement. Do you see improvements in industry academia engagement and knowledge sharing? Will that promote the women in STEM to remain in the workforce, and the workforce becomes a more inclusive and diverse, and thus reducing the skills shortage also? What are your thoughts?
Certainly, we see more and more collaboration and the dialogue between industry and academia, and that's critical in bridging this gap. When I think of academia, I think of two aspects of academia. I think of the output aspect, where the universities graduate extremely competent women who can fill in a lot of gaps in the workforce. But also universities are the receiving end, with many of the faculty members being women. So I'll address both aspects with keeping in mind the relationship between industry and academia. At the first level, I think the universities could do more in trying to recruit, and in collaboration with academia, with the industry, try to recruit more women into the STEM fields, especially engineering and science and technology, where there is a shortage. It is the industry's role to make sure that we retain those women in these positions. And you know, back to the question that you asked, Nikhil, I think the industry has an obligation to accommodate certain circumstances without penalizing women for taking, for example, maternity leaves and so on. And we see more and more of this. We see more and more companies giving paternity leaves now for fathers to stay at home with the kids, and more reception from society of such arrangements. We also, what we don't see yet is a recognition from academia for women who are part of the academic workforce, of the, what could be done to support them. So, for example, if a woman's career is interrupted by pregnancy and nursing of the kids and so on, how would that impact her career? And why don't we put that counter on hold in terms of publications, in terms of productivity? Why not put that on hold during that period? We see a little bit of this happening, but it's critical that more of that will happen. And definitely the dialogue between industry and academia is an important one, but I think both are equally responsible for addressing this challenge.
Thank you so much, Alaa. Having lived in US for quite a long time, nearly 30 years, and now I'm living in the United Kingdom, in Cambridge, and I see there is a huge difference in how the maternity leave is handled in this place. And in UK, it is so much in favor of the woman taking care of the kids, the babies, and then coming back to the workforce. Again, I have several colleagues who have had babies, and then after 9 months or after a year, they came back and their husbands who are working in the same organization, then they take a leave. And that really helps raise the good kid. And my colleagues, they're still in the workforce and they're contributing so much. And especially one of my colleagues is a great proponent of and support of SDGs, and she's always talking about that. At this time, I think I will go to His Excellencies Mr. Okinawa and Mr. Ould Tah. It's about the economic recovery and how do you keep a record of that? There is a question: do you maintain record based on the university's side or from the workforce side? How many women join the STEM force, and then whether they need economic help at some point, and how many of them remain in the workforce? If any one of you could answer. Mr. Okinawa, may I request you to answer, please? Do you have any records in Japan?
I'm afraid I don't have knowledge of the figures.
Okay.
Regarding the question.
Yeah. And how about in the, and does Arab Bank have any records that if the, are you aware of any records in Africa or so, the women who, what percentage of women who came to STEM, they leave, and what percentage of them still remain?
I think this is very interesting area. Maybe that can be an area in which we can try to work in the next coming years. But so far, at the best of my knowledge, there is no statistical information in Africa, at least about the drops in STEMs for women. But okay. I do. It's a very interesting area of research, and it can be. By the way, we are now working with the Federation of African Universities, and maybe we can suggest them to start some research in this area, because this is very interesting area. But so far, I'm not aware of very accurate information on that.
Right. Okay. But I mean, we can of course work towards that, and having that and keeping a record of the people who had to leave, and if there is any help they need, will be really great to have. I just saw that Dr. Şirin Tekinay has joined. Şirin, have you joined, please? I was wondering if she has joined and if I could have her for even a couple of minutes.
Soma, I think Ambassador Okinawa maybe wanted to add something.
Yes, I have something.
Okay, yes, Mr. Okinawa, could you please add your thoughts?
Yes. No, I want to go back to the previous question that you mentioned. So, you know, the government of Japan has been really focusing on the issue of trying to promote women in the workforce, because we have a declining population.
Right.
Without doing anything, the percentage of the number of the workforce is shrinking already. So what the government is trying to do is trying really to push the elderly and also, of course, the women to be part of the workforce and stay in the workforce. And for that, you know, before, the women who are working, you know, they were working to the great sacrifice, you know, personal sacrifice. But I think, of course, the family needs to support it. But the government also needs to support the women working in the, I mean, continuing to work despite the birth of their children and so on. So what the government has been doing over the, well, about in the last 8 or 7 years is that the government has introduced more, they have been building or supporting more childcare facilities. They have extended the maternal leave period, and the government funds the period when they are not working, so that it's not just the companies who are taking on the burden. And also we have a paternal leave for childcare, and they can take paternal leave for up to 3 years. And for the first half or first 1.5 years, I heard that they get 50% of the pay is guaranteed. And these are not something that just the companies are doing. It's actually the government is funding much of this. So I think there is a role that governments can play. And I think this is a conscious policy on the part of the government of Japan, which we have been promoting. In addition, the government has introduced new legislation to allow certain professions to have a contract based on not the number of hours worked, but based on the results of their work. So that, because one of the big constraints is that the people have to work long hours, which women cannot do sometimes. But by introducing legislation which allows for certain professional posts to have a contract based on the result of their work, and I think this kind of changes in the legislation very much suits the current circumstances where people are doing telework, and I think the trend towards more work online also, I think, will make it easier for women to continue their careers. So that's just my comment.
Yes, and absolutely fascinating. Thank you so much for sharing. Now, we have just been joined by Şirin Tekinay, Dr. Tekinay, who is the chair of Global Engineering Deans Council. And would you like to share a few thoughts on women in STEM and in the time of pandemic, how it's affecting them, and what can we all do for that?
Absolutely. Thank you ever so much. In great company. I'm proud to be here. My apologies for the delay with which I had to join, but I had connectivity problems. I'm glad I'm able to make it to welcome everyone to this extremely important event. I know we've been hearing Happy Women's Day all around, but this is a different kind of day of recognition. It's a solemn day to remember all those who have fought for equal rights, and there is still a lot of ways to go. As the Global Engineering Deans Council, diversity in engineering has been one of our pillars and one of our core values, and always our strategic objective. At the time of pandemic, we see that diversity-related concerns have heightened. They were already in place and very much dear to our hearts, in that we all have become familiar with the leaky pipeline model of keeping women in STEM in the workforce. In different geographies, we look at the snapshot of women in engineering education. And at that point, we observe the paradox of gender equality index of the country we're talking about, and the number of women who go into engineering education, such that in those countries where the gender equality index is already high, then we have fewer women going into engineering education. And quite counterintuitively, at a first glance, we have more women going into engineering education at those countries where the gender equality index is lower. This is not exactly a paradox. In the United Arab Emirates, where I served as the first and unfortunately today the only female woman engineering dean, our percentage of female engineering students was one of the highest at about 34%. The reason is because the profession is gendered. The professional identity is masculine in a lot of STEM fields already. So more women go into this perceived to be harder but more respectable profession to break free from the low gender index. But they are not kept in the workforce. This is not a paradox at all. This is just more of a demonstration of the cards stacked against women in STEM. Having said that, the precious few women in STEM fields in the workforce everywhere have suffered greatly because of the pandemic, not necessarily because of family responsibilities, but because of priorities. Imagine households where there is limited internet access. Now everyone's working from home, and there is a choice to be made about who needs to access the internet. The children need to go to school. There is the man of the family. So the choices made against the women's work at the STEM related fields and workplace. So as the Global Engineering Deans Council, we are cautioning everyone against the statistics at given snapshots of the leaky pipeline. We need to look at the engineering professional identity or the professional identities of STEM careers, make sure they are not gendered, gender neutral, and all inclusive. Why do we need to do this? Not because it is the human thing to do, but according to a 2015 McKinsey report, if gender equality across the world was achieved by 2025, then we would have about 28 trillion US dollars equivalent pumped into the global economy. Now, achieving exact gender equality 50-50 everywhere is, of course, a utopic ideal, unfortunately. But then there is the more realistic goal of every region reaching up to the best country with the best gender index in that region. And that would be, I'll wrap up in 30 seconds, Soma. That would pump in about 12 trillion US dollars into the global economy. Now we're halfway into the time horizon of that report. We're nowhere near. In fact, if we go at this pace, it is projected that in 170 years we'll achieve global gender equality. We're happy to be here to do something about speeding this up. So thank you very much and welcome everybody.
Thank you, Shireen, and thank you for joining us. And we are at the very end of this session, and I was wondering if I could ask Mihoku to say something, but not. I mean, I think we will wait for that for the next sessions and one of these sessions if we could get you. Thanks to each and every one of you for joining this session and making it so interesting. I could have gone for the whole day being in this session, but we are going to start another one at the top of the hour at 12 noon GMT. For those who are attending this session, please be here with us to attend the session, and you can use the same connection for each and every session. So let's take a 3 minutes break and come back at 12 GMT. Thanks to everyone. Bye-bye.